This is a story that took place about 30 years ago, and it's about how I had the opportunity to meet and experience the ant god. And I mean that in the more spiritual, mystical, shamanistic sense, where I had the opportunity to meet the intelligence, I guess what we would call the intelligence, the collective conscious, the oversoul, whatever, of the animal spirit, or I guess in this case, the insect spirit of ants. For those who may object to the nature and content of this experience, this was a magic mushroom induced experience. So there were entheogenic substances involved. I refuse to call them drugs because they are sacraments as far as I am concerned. And looking at it from a thelonic position, the plant intelligence itself is really one of the apex intelligences. Like lions are apex predators, plants are apex intelligences because it does something that really nothing else does to the degree it does. It transforms pure energy into life. That's pretty impressive. If we consider intelligence as the ability to solve problems, that's probably one of the biggest problems that needed to be solved. How to turn light into life. That's a big one. However, for the record, there is really no such thing as a problem as far as the universe is concerned. So I hesitate to even call intelligence problem-solving ability, more like creative opportunity creation abilities. It would be a much better way to describe intelligence. And plants are really top in that field. So I consider plants to be a sacrament, a gift, an offering from this intelligence that all life comes from or depends on. And in the case of mushrooms, we're talking about another apex intelligence because it was the funguses that, as a result of mining minerals from rocks, it created soil. So really the uber apex intelligence in this case is the single cell organism, because plants and mushrooms both evolved from single cell organisms, but down two different paths, both of which necessary to work together in order to create life as we currently know it. In my case, I had decided to take some psilocybin mushrooms, but I didn't want to just go out and buy them because that seemed very unsacramental. So I managed to procure some spores from Mexico, and I grew them myself, which really took quite a long time. I think I spent maybe up to 6 months before I got the kind of quality I was looking for. My earlier attempts, they were coming up weird and deformed and misshapen, or they just didn't look healthy because my environment wasn't clean, or they wouldn't grow well because it was either too cold or too hot. I ended up having to build a separate little room that was relatively sterile and humidity controlled and temperature controlled, which I did in my basement, which really blew me away because I have seen these mushrooms grow wild in cow patties out in nature, which is perhaps one of the most, environmentally uncontrolled and unsanitized space that you can be in. And they were happily growing, tons of them, in cow patties. So that remained a mystery. Not really a mystery. Clearly the environment that they grow in is something that they are completely compatible with. And when you take them out of that environment, there's going to be a lot of new variables that it has to deal with. But it was surprising that they grow wild in cow patties, and I needed a sanitized lab with shortwave ultraviolet for antibacteria and moisture control, etc., etc. But I finally got it down. They looked great. And I felt very good about the energy that I had put into creating these. it's like over those months of buying the equipment, building the room, testing, etc., I felt like a relationship had begun to grow between myself and this yet to exist intelligence that I was trying to birth, essentially. It felt to me, this could very much just be projection, but it also, even though I felt very good about what I was doing, I also felt like I was this intelligence that I was about to grow an instance of was appreciative of the time and effort and attention that I was putting into it. So I felt we had a relationship. Now, even if that was complete projection and fantasy and anthropomorphic blah 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 on my part, it was still significant because it set the stage for a really healthy perspective to go into this experience. So I took, I guess, what would be considered a heroic dose, which was 5 grams dried that had been freshly picked. And I went outside. At the time, I was living in Woodstock, New York, out in the woods. And I had built a large pyramid out in the woods. And I don't care what the mythbusters or scientists or what anybody else says or can even quote unquote prove. There is some serious energy happening inside a pyramid. Many years ago, in the 70s, there was a pyramid that I lived in for a little while out in California. I literally could not stay in my body when I went into this pyramid. For the record, it was not exactly like the Cheops pyramid in Egypt. It was a slightly different shape, but still a pyramid. I would go into the pyramid, it would be pitch black, and then the next thing I know, I was just, the pyramid disappeared, and I was kind of in like another dimension that looked the same as the room that the pyramid was in. And there were people there, people that weren't actually people, but other, I guess astral people, not exactly sure. But it happened so naturally and so smoothly. There was no question. And when I would come out of the pyramid, I was usually really inspired to do some drawings or other like artistic expression. And all of the ones that I did in that moment, during that time, were really impressive for me. I mean, I was surprised. I was coming up with these amazing concepts and images. So, since then, I have pretty much been in love with pyramids. And I have done a lot of work since then, which was a long time ago, with pyramids. So, naturally, I had one in my backyard. So, I took the mushrooms, I went out, and I sat in the pyramid. And I was meditating, well, not so much meditating, but I was just kind of being in myself inside this pyramid. And this was the first time I had taken psilocybin mushrooms. I had taken other entheogenics with some pretty profound results, but this was obviously quite different, and I really didn't know what to expect. But I just sat there, and one of the first things that started to happen was I felt the pyramid was spinning. But it was actually spinning in both directions at the same time, which made me really nauseous. My head was like, how is that happening? How can I even conceive of this? And wow, I'm going to throw up any second. But I didn't, because eventually that kind of dizziness wore out, and I moved into like another level. And it really felt like once I got into that other level, it felt like that dizziness, that double reverse spinning effect, was like the liftoff, was like the getting out of the physical realm. And I was having some amazing, insightful inner journeys. But at some point, I really felt that I had to get out of the pyramid. It was like I needed to be in nature and in the woods. So I go outside, and I was completely blown away. Like, it was inconceivable how amazingly beautiful and sophisticated, and just the miracle of existence was blowing my mind. And I wanted to go lay down on this large bed of moss in the middle of this rocky dirt. But I remembered that the bed of moss was covered in ants. I had tried to lay down there in the past, and I was immediately covered in ants. And I tried it more than one time. So I'm standing there wishing I could be laying down, but realizing it would be really bad if I started getting covered in ants while, I'm on mushrooms. I probably wouldn't respond well to it. And even though I'm thinking rationally like that, I'm actually in another reality. I'm not in the. I'm thinking about. I guess I was in two realities at once. I'm looking at the moss, and I'm standing there in my body, but my consciousness, my awareness was transported to another realm, a very misty, not bright but not dark, and very misty realm. And I was standing in that realm just like I was standing on the land next to this patch. And as I was looking into this mist, I saw a form begin to kind of take shape. I really couldn't tell what it was, but it was really big. Maybe 30, 40, 50 feet high, and maybe 10 feet wide. And it was very slowly moving towards me. I was curious. I wasn't nervous. I was curious, but I was also kind of aware, like, I should keep an eye out on what that is. But it was heading right towards me, so that seemed it would be inevitable. And as it began coming out of the mist, getting clearer and clearer, I saw what it was. And it was a giant ant. And I didn't just see this ant, I felt it. There was a presence, a powerful, powerful presence, as this giant 30-foot high, 15-foot wide ant very slowly floated towards me. It wasn't using its legs. It was floating. But it was floating a little faster than a turtle. And as it got closer and closer, the presence was so awesome in the sense that it inspired awe and intimidating, because it felt so powerful that I prostrated myself in front of it. I literally got on my knees and did not look at it because it was so intimidating. And it moved right up close to me, and I'm not moving at all. But I did want to show it the respect I thought it deserved. And I wasn't prostrating myself out of fear, but awesome respect for what I was experiencing from this amazing, amazing being, entity. And it didn't change its energy when it stopped in front of me. It didn't ask anything. It didn't say anything. It didn't send any message. It just waited. I connected the dots between the ants on the grassy mound, the mossy mound that I wanted to lay down on. And I was thinking, I wish I could lay down there, but there are too many ants. And I connected the fact that is what may have brought me to this place, because I was thinking about ants. But it was actually more than that, because I realized, at least, I don't know if that was the intention of this ant entity, but I realized I had the opportunity, which I shouldn't throw away, to make a request of this ant god. And so, in all of the humility that I could muster up in my spirit, I asked if I could lay down on this moss without being molested by any ants. And to show my appreciation for that gesture, if this entity decided to grant me that, I would go out of my way for the rest of my life to always show and share the highest respect for ants. I will be a voice for the ants. And wherever I am, I will go out of my way to ensure that the ants are better off for my being there. I mean, really, what else could I offer? I just waited. And then I felt the energy of the ant god changing. And it became softer. I mean, it was the energy of the ant was both one of wisdom and tremendous strength. But it also felt really hard. It was like, I guess stoic would really be the right word. If you could imagine maybe something like a machine with a purpose and an awareness. Because it was, in many ways, like a machine. In the sense that it did not waver the slightest bit from its attention, its mission, its focus. But after I made my plea and my request, I felt that energy soften a little. And then the ant just slowly started to disappear back into the fog and was gone. Now, the ant never said, quote unquote, telepathically or through visions or anything, never said anything to me. Other than I felt it shift in its energy. That was it. And I took that shift in its energy to be a granting of my request. So I go over to the mossy, ant-infested plot, and I lay down. And I wait a few minutes. No ants, which was already unusual. I would have felt some ants by that time already. And then the mushrooms really started to kick in. And I soon was out. I was soon moving away from the physical very fast. And I had one of the more life-changing, profound experiences that I've ever had. And then I started coming back down to earth, and I was still on the mossy grass. And there wasn't a single ant on me. I later realized I was on that grass for an hour without moving, as I was off in this other dimensional realm. So for 1 hour, I was on this grass, this moss that was usually covered with ants. This time, not a single ant on me. Okay, I continued up with my journey, which took a couple of really crazy turns here and there. But when it was all over, the next day, I went back out to the mossy knoll, and I wanted to lay down on it again. So I did. And boom, covered in ants. In like minutes. Ants all over the place. So there was no question in my mind that I connected with the intelligence of the ants, the collective consciousness of the ants, or the morphic identity, or the archetypal instantiation. I'm not sure what you would call it. But whatever we call it, it's something massive when you consider that there are about 20 quadrillion ants on Earth, with a total biomass of 12 megatons of just the dry carbon that makes up ants. Ants alone make up 2/3 of the biomass of all insects on the planet. And this biomass exceeds the combined biomass of all birds and mammals, and more than 20% of the biomass of all humans. So the ant intelligence has quite a presence on the planet. And that intelligence is, even by our own standards of human intelligence, is very sophisticated. Some of the ant colonies that are created, which hold up to 7 million ants, have their own forms of air conditioning. I mean, they're massive underground, different levels. It's very well designed. And they create these tubings or these channels and structures, like architectural shapes internally, that cause the air to circulate. And they maintain the temperature to be very consistent and stable so that they can grow certain types of fungus in their colonies, which they use as food and which also helps in the circulation of the air. And, coincidentally or not, the fungus that they grow inside their colonies, at least with the leaf-cutting ants, which is a huge species of ants, is part of the Lepiotessae family of mushrooms. Also happens to be the same family of mushrooms that the Amanita muscaria comes from, that red mushroom with the white dots that grows in northern Europe, that is also very psychoactive. In any case, there's clearly a very symbiotic and synergetic relationship between ants and mushrooms. The intelligence that we can see just in how they work, how they build their nests, how they interact with their environment is so obvious that I cannot imagine how anybody could deny the fact that this is a sign of intelligence. Like as in engineering intelligence. The ancients, or the shamanic cultures, pre-modern society, would have called this the spirit of the ant, or the spirit of the plants, or the spirit of the wolf, or the spirit of the moon, or whatever. They understood the nature of things by their spirits, which we look at as being somewhat primitive. And while it's not technically advanced, it is incredibly sophisticated. And it explains many things that modern technology and modern science can't explain, and doesn't even want to try and explain, especially when understanding how energy, awareness, consciousness, and reality all work together. It is far more comprehensive than our sciences, which are limited to the physical world only. And I'm not poo-pooing sciences. It's really impressive what science has been able to do. But what they are absolutely unable to do, nor really do they want to, because I don't even think they can conceive beyond the fact that their world is locked permanently in the physical, the way it is today. If it can't be tested and measured, it doesn't exist. And we obviously can't test or measure anything that's not of this world, because we don't have ways to test and measure. So the reason I'm even sharing this story is because that ant god is a perfect example of an archetypal, self-aware intelligence or awareness, or what we refer to as a tholonic intelligence, or just a tholon, that doesn't exist in the physical, but has instances in the physical. And it's reasonable to presume that the same is true for pretty much all life forms, not just the insects or animals, but for humans as well. That there is a uber consciousness, an uber awareness that is both self-aware and of which we are instances of. And that fits quite neatly into the holarchic idea, this tholonic hierarchy, where there are partons and holons, right? Where the holon is a whole made up of the parts, but that parton is also a whole that is made up of partons. So you have pieces that make wholes, which act as pieces that make wholes, etc., etc. And that is the tholonic model. Except that the tholonic model is in 3D and it's fractal, and it's based on tetrahedrons. And I've absolutely held true to my promise to the ant god. Not that my word wouldn't be good in any other situation, but I am always aware whenever there's an ant. It's like an alarm goes off in my head when I see any ant anywhere, and I'm like, okay, be aware, there are ants, don't step on them. What can you do to make their existence better in some way? I'm always hyper aware of that whenever I see an ant. And it's something that happens naturally and automatically. It's not something I'm forcing on myself. It's like I naturally feel that connection now to the ants. And I believe a main part of the reason for that is because when I was in the presence of this incredibly strong energy coming from this ant, or that was this ant god, I believe it changed me. Just like if you are in the presence of a strong electromagnetic force or a nuclear force or really any kind of strong force, it will cause changes in how you're put together. It'll either change your DNA or, it'll change your wiring in your head. It can change things that are not physical. But the presence was so strong that something in me definitely changed. That was the only time I took a heroic dose of magic mushrooms, because it was one of those experiences that was so intense, so profound, so life-changing, so enlightening that I could spend the rest of my life trying to understand what I was being shown. Not just because of that ant experience, the mushroom itself had a extremely powerful and self-aware intelligence that expressed itself to me or through me for those few hours. The mushrooms are ancient wisdom and really one of the most fundamental ingredients of life. I mean, humans share some of the same DNA as mushrooms because mushrooms, pretty much all life as we know it on this planet right now, had some roots in fungus. So it's part of who we are, and it's an ancient part of who we are. And it knows how to open the doors to that ancient knowledge that is available from where? Well, there's all kinds of theories about that, and it's one of the subjects that the Thelonic model is attempting to explore on a more analytical level. Like, where is all of this information stored? How do you access it? What's the interface to this seemingly infinite warehouse of knowledge and wisdom? Anyway, that's that story. This is a story that took place about 30 years ago, and it's about how I had the opportunity to meet and experience the ant god. And I mean that in the